Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare ever changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. Today, we're going to be talking about whether patient experience is marketing or tech. And thanks to Sway.Health for sponsoring this episode. Be sure to join us at the Sway.Health Live Marketing Conference happening April 15th to 17th in sunny San Diego. And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 18 years of health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. Man, are you ready for San Diego, Colin?
I am excited for San Diego. It is so sunny there. It's one of my favorite places to go. So yes, I am ready.
And it's actually on Coronado Island, even though it's a peninsula. We all call it Coronado Island. And what's amazing is I'm told that every hotel room has a view of the water. So it's just an amazing place.
I cannot wait. I am super excited for it. Truly, I am excited that it's going to be the perfect weather.
So, Colin, this topic for this episode is really, I think, queued up for you because you live, eat, breathe, sleep, love. It's your hidden lover is patient experience. You just love everything about it. So let's kick it off. Why don't you kick it off this time and tell us what aspects of patient experience are marketing?
Yeah. So thank you. First of all, this is a fun episode for me because it is right up an area that I love talking about. Yeah. So you're right. A patient experience, the marketing side of it is all around how to get that patient attracted to your brand so that they want to come and find out more. That find out more could be finding a doc. It could be just discovering what services and service lines you offer, just finding out where you are. So that it's not I'll call it the mechanics of booking an appointment or anything like that. That's another part of patient experience, but it's sort of the upfront stuff. How do they even know to go to you, right? Is it because you've got a 5-star rating on the map, right, on Google? Is it because they saw your billboard while driving? Is it because they saw your ad on TV or whatever it was? That's sort of the patient acquisition side, which is part of the initial experience. And then, of course, there's a lot of marketing that gets added to the experience throughout that patient's journey with you once they decide that they really want to come to you for care.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of some recent conversations I've had where people are like, "What do you do?" Right? And I'm like, "Well, I write about healthcare IT and we have a healthcare marketing community." And they're like, "Wait, so like hospitals and health systems have marketing and PR people?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like they need a lot of them." They're like, "Well, why would they need marketing and PR people?" I'm like, oh man, really? But it's so fascinating that a lot of people just assume, like, well, we all get sick, so you don't need to do marketing and PR because you're going to get sick and go to the doctor anyway. Little do they know that things like your reputation, as you kind of alluded to, your reputation in the community impacts the patient experience. And in fact, if your reputation doesn't match what they experience in the hospital, that becomes a really big problem for you. First of all, they don't want to go there if they think you're a terrible organization, and no doctor wants to see a patient who has the preconceived notion that you're a terrible health system and I'm going to get terrible care, because now the doctor has an uphill battle to be able to fight against it. And so, those are two elements that I was thinking about. It's like, that really feels like marketing to me and the importance of it.
No, it is very true, right? There are a lot of things on patient experience that you wouldn't think of that they would have to do. Most people would agree there is no such thing as demand generation in healthcare because that you don't have to worry about. People will get sick. People do have issues. They do have to come and see a doctor or they have to come and get emergency care. That's not the challenge. The challenge is how do you get them to choose you? Right? Because there is some choice, not a lot. Sometimes you are limited by what payer, what plans, and those kinds of things. But there is an opportunity to choose where you can get care, and I think that is where the marketing side really comes in. And even if you didn't have a choice, the choice is I don't go in at all.
Yeah,
right?
I
And
was
I
gonna
think
say that's the biggest competitor.
right, exactly. And so I think hospitals are aware of that and health systems are aware of that. They go, okay, what we're really fighting is maybe not the hospital down the street that's our competitor. It's just if they have no choice, they just may forego it because they go, I don't want to pay the deductible, or maybe they think it's much higher than it really is, right? And they just decide not to come in. They'll forego it, which, obviously it doesn't help the healthcare system, but it also doesn't help that patient if they truly needed that care. So there is an aspect of marketing here, even though everyone needs healthcare at some point.
Yeah. The other place marketing gets in is, around demand gen, is driving specific service lines that are profitable to the hospital that subsidize many of the other pieces of care that are given at the hospital. So there's something to say about that as well. The other challenge is you look at some of them, you kind of alluded to some of these other technologies, whether it's driving people to come to your office for a follow-up visit, or whether it's trying to have them come and do their return visit, or even just their initial visit or their wellness visits. There's this whole marketing piece to it that you're like, okay, well, you can create an amazing patient experience by just showing I actually care about you as a patient. Now, it sadly doesn't happen nearly enough, but that's a big part of marketing, and should be, is reaching out to them to say, hey, I care about your health and your wellness, and I want to improve it.
Yeah, like that is where the marketing element comes in, right? Like sending a message to a patient is mechanical. That can be done with technology. What that message says, how it says it, the language you use, the
Mm.
level of personalization, that is all marketing, right? Do you greet them by their first name, right? Do you include a little nice welcome message? How do you word something? So those are things that definitely come into play. And as you mentioned, John, personalization is so key these days because if you do that, then it makes you appear, and I'm sure they do care, but it represents the kind of care that they may be getting, right? So highly personalized communication is sort of one of the big buzzwords in patient experience right now.
But here's a good example, Colin. What about the call center? Is that marketing? Is that tech? Is it operations? I mean, we could throw in operations too, right?
It is the confluence of all of it, right? Like it is absolutely a combination of marketing plus tech plus operations, right? And let's throw in this other word. AI is really changing this area, and rightfully so, because honestly, a lot of organizations are finding it tough to staff call centers right now. Um, and so when you're able to use AI and maybe bring in technologies like chatbots, now customers and patients can get the answers more quickly. They can get answers more relevant, and more applicable to the answers they previously given. And then you let your live agents handle the real tough ones. And so the chatbot will route them to the appropriate agent who can then just deal with that problem. And they're not waiting on hold for 20 minutes to answer something very simple, right? Like, you know, so there is a lot of technology and a lot of process and a lot of humanity that gets put into a call center.
I mean, think about the three modalities that are probably most common for getting answers: the website,
Right.
visiting the website, just getting the answer yourself, kind of self-service. You're your own chatbot. You have the chatbot giving you answers, and you have the call center. I mean, those are the three modalities. And you look at those and you're like, which of those are marketing? Like the website is for sure marketing. I don't know any tech people that want to do anything other than say, here's the web server, right? Maybe an integration with my chart, or some portal, patient portal or something. They don't want to touch it, right? I had that happen at a CIO forum. They said, how many of you do the website? And the CIOs are like, well, I saw an email as a patient that we got a new one. It's like they literally had no clue. It's marketing, right? The call center generally falls under marketing too. I think they see it more. But then like the chatbot, man, that's like sitting somewhere in the middle. Like you need some tech chops to be able to do it. But if I'm a clinician, I'm like, what answers are you doing? The CMO cares about that. So this is actually the whole reason for this topic.
Yeah. And there are certain aspects of patient experience that are pure tech, right? Like, and they're mostly on the back end. Like for example, the bill when it comes out, and that's all revenue cycle, right? But how that bill gets delivered, what language is on it, is it actually in plain English? The lab result, how you send that to the portal, and what does it say? Is it just a bunch of gobbledygook numbers? with terms that no patient can understand, or do you have technology that essentially translates it into layman's terms so that they don't freak out and flood your call center going, I don't understand. Is this good or bad if it's 90? Right? Like, but there is a technology backbone here that provides the information back to the patient on the tail end of their visit. And all the mechanisms around, like how do they pay, and can they pay online, and how do they book an appointment? That's all technical, right? Like the online appointment booking and all these technology, the texting tools. There is a lot of technology that has to come into play to provide what everyone wants, which is that sort of seamless, frictionless experience for a patient, and frankly for the healthcare system too.
Yeah, I've heard it over and over at the HFMAs and RCM conferences that I've gone to, that patients' financial experience has a massive impact on their patient experience, right? So that's a good one. I think the other one that's like purely in the tech right now, and I think it's a bit of a sad situation that marketing's not more involved, and that's all of the value-based care efforts. So whether it's the ACO or whether it's some other value-based care effort that you're doing, when you look at those, they're big communication tools backed by a lot of data. But at the end of the day, what are they really doing? They're doing marketing. They're creating personas out of the data to be able to understand how to market to the persona in a way, and they're going to use the communication tools with the right messaging to be able to encourage the behaviors that we want to be able to lower the costs as part of a value-based care effort. And yet, I haven't seen any marketing person really get deeply involved in any of these efforts. They've always been a tech tool that kind of goes in and solves it. And to be fair, I don't know many marketers who want to dive into deep analytics around population health to be able to address the, accountable care situation. But, it's interesting that it really is a tech and it's not marketing. And that impacts the patient experience as well, right? Are they proactively cared for, or is it just come to me when you want? That makes a really big difference.
Yeah, no, it really does. And you've touched on it there, right? Like there's so much here that it overlaps so many different areas, and sometimes it can get ignored, right? And I think that's one of the challenges, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But like you said, like a chatbot falls right in between IT and marketing, and what you're talking about in terms of, I'll call it behavior motivation, right? Like if that falls between operations, clinical side, and marketing, right? Because marketers know how to make people or try to pressure people or influence people to take certain actions. Yet they're not consulted a lot of times when it comes to sending out patient education materials, right? Like to think about how you could engineer these things maybe a little bit differently so that the patient was more likely to take the action you want, to keep their levels down, to go on the diet that you want them to do, right? Like all those things are a form of marketing. So yeah, I mean, to your point, I think if we had more collaboration, I think it would be better. And it isn't always just to throw some tech at it in order to solve some of these patient experience issues.
There's one other that we probably don't think is a patient experience tool, but that's the EHR.
Yeah.
Like, does any tech have more influence over the patient experience than the EHR? Probably not, right? Like,
Yeah.
how you
Nope.
implement that. I mean, even if you just piss off the doctors because you implement it poorly, you're impacting the patient experience because now the doctor's pissed off and can't focus on actually providing the care that they need to. And so, yeah, the EHR is a piece of tech. No doubt
Right.
there.
How integratable it is, how the portal behaves, like all these things are massive influences on overall patient experience. And hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today, we're discussing whether patient experience is marketing or tech or some combination of both. This episode is brought to you by our sister publication, Sway Health. We're happy to announce, as John mentioned off the top, that our Sway Health Live 2025 event will be happening April 15th to 17th in sunny San Diego.
Yeah.
Head to live.sway.health. That's sway with two A's, .health for more information. So let me ask you a question about this, John. Does patient experience suffer because you do have to bridge this gap between marketing and tech?
The answer is an obvious one, right? Of course it does, and of course, but so how does that appear? Okay, online self scheduling, patients love it. They're demanding it. If you're the marketing person doing surveys of your patients to understand how they're doing, I'm confident, and I've seen some different people talk about how much demand there is. Like, why can't I schedule it myself? Right. But so you look at that and you're like, okay, but can marketing do it on its own? 100% not. In fact, not only do they need the tech involved with it to check the security of the application, to check to implement it in the way, to integrate it with the EHR, or, assuming you're using a third party tool, there's not that many EHRs that offer online self-scheduling, and they're often not configurable enough for it. So most of them seem to use an external one, and then they also need the clinical, right? Which adds to it as well. So that gap between them you see all the time, where it's marketing may love that. In fact, they may love it because then they can drive more traffic to it to drive more appointments, which is what marketing is good at doing. But rather than to a call center that drives appointments with a specific phone number that manages what marketing, if marketing is effective or not. Like that's what we were doing and still are doing in some places, right? But it's much easier to just do the self-service. So I think that's like a simple example where it's like, if you haven't mined that gap, then it's going to be tough to cross.
Yeah, there's no doubt to your point, John, that there is a challenge, and patient experience suffers because there is a gap. But I would say it's not just with the IT department and marketing. I just think there's a gap between marketing and clinical. There's between operations and marketing, between finance and marketing. Marketing has always been a little bit separate from everyone else because there is this was this notion that, oh, they're just the people who attract, they're just people attracting at the front end,
Mm.
right? All this back end stuff really isn't them. And honestly, they probably weren't staffed to even take on some of these projects. So, I think it just naturally grew up to be a little bit of a silo. And it's only been since the last decade, I think, where people are realizing, oh, actually, we probably can use marketing help here. And now marketing is finally getting a seat at the table, so to speak, to bring some of these things forward. So I think the gaps are there not because anyone meant them to be there. And now it is suffering because we're realizing now we have to go build up these bridges to over these gaps. But I think it is happening. I think the challenge, though, to me, is actually one more of budgeting and
Mm.
personnel. It's I think IT folks, I mean, they have so many priorities and so many are competing that when marketing comes to them, sometimes it just seems fluffy, right? Like they just like, what do you mean you need online appointment? You need a better online appointment book? We've got one. Like it works, right? Like you just go here, you log in 6 times, and then you can go book an appointment with this one department. Not and what IT doesn't understand is that yes, that does work for that one department who has that one method, but there's this other department that patient also has to see where you have a completely different way to book an appointment, right? And so what marketing's job is to do is to really highlight the problem in terms that IT can understand. Because I think what can be exacerbated is when marketing comes to you and says, I got a problem, and IT thinks it's like this, when in fact marketing says it's this, and they haven't done their job articulating it. So I've spoken to a lot of people recently who say that's actually their biggest challenge is and biggest way to bridge that gap is to really speak the other language and make sure that you can get the priorities so you can address these issues so that patients do end up getting the experience that they really want.
Yeah, I would add two other layers to this complication. One is what you said, which is the language gap. And it turns out marketing people do it and tech people do it. And as someone who lives in both worlds a little bit, like it's true. Like tech people, if you start speaking to them and you don't respect the tech terms that they understand, if you use them the wrong way, they can be quite arrogant, right? Like they can be like, no, that you just lose them, right? But the same is true the other direction. When the tech people come and start talking to marketing and they don't know about funnels and SQLs and MQLs and driving service line behaviors and click through rates and all, like they lose them too, and then they lose respect for each other, and then it's tough to bridge that gap when there's a loss of respect. So I think that's one challenge, and then layer on top of that the other challenge, which is somewhat to your point of the silos that exist. And I think the reason these silos exist is because IT has a zillion projects to do, 5,000 tickets that everyone submitted that they could work on. So if their question is, do I want to bridge the gap or do I want to work on something else? The answer can be something else. And that's true for marketing as well. If you say, oh, do you want to work on this really hard thing where you're going to have to bring lots of constituents together to solve this problem to make an amazing patient experience? Or you could go work on the website and no one will bug you. Like I kind of get where they go, right? Path of least resistance, water flows where it goes, right? And so do humans in a lot of ways.
No, and that is a lot of talk I hear at all the conferences I go to around patient experience, right? It is sort of speaking this language so that you can get your projects, which are critical from a patient experience standpoint, but maybe not articulated the right way, right? Like all you have to do is talk to a CFO and go, man, if I can reduce no-shows by 50%, we're talking way more dollars in the door, right? That's big. And all of a sudden a CFO will light up and go, oh, okay, now I'm behind that project, right? Like all of a sudden they care about no-shows. Whereas before they're like, what do you mean I have to buy another system that reminds someone of their appointment? Or you want to buy a system that allows you to personalize it or hyper personalize it. You word it like that and it'll sound like a fluffy project. You word it the other way and people go, oh, 50% reduction in no-shows. I like that, right? And then same thing when you go to the IT department, you say, listen, we want to implement, a system that consolidates all of patient messaging into one platform. They're like, well, why? That just sounds like a make work project. I've already got, but then you explain to them, no, wait, today we have 16 and you're paying 15 times the maintenance that you don't have to. So we need one vendor to do all of this. We don't need 15 and they're all buried, right? And you probably don't know that they're all there. And so you determine like that and the IT goes, oh yeah, vendor consolidation. I like that. Single platform. I like that even better. So
No, it's a great point about being able to speak the strategic language of the leadership, the CFO, the CEO, like that's a big deal. But I think the other thing that's held actually CIOs and CMOs, and I'm talking about chief marketing officer, back from some of this is they didn't have the audience with the C level. They didn't see it as strategic, and so I think that's changing a bit over time. And we, especially, CIOs are doing that for sure, where they're saying we need to be a strategic part of the organization. I shouldn't just report to the CFO. This is an important part. I think marketing officers can make the same case, and especially when you look at the impact of things like downtime. Guess what? Your CMO becomes really strategic then, because how are you going to communicate about downtime? How are you going to integrate with let the patients know what's happening? So I think that's the other thing is they just never had a voice there in a lot of organizations, but they're trying to now.
yeah, and I gotta say there are some vendors out there that are really doing a good job to bridge this gap, and really highlighting this problem and really bringing it to the fore. Like one that I think I've talked about a few times, like eClinical Works.
Mm.
They've implemented some really cool AI tech that detects whether or not you are likely as a patient to no show.
Mhm.
It's based on past behaviors, but it's also based on the type of patient you are, the profiles you have. And so they're able to say, hey, actually, when you book this appointment, they have a 60% chance of not showing up. And so this person needs more intervention. So you need actually a few more messages and a few other ones versus this person, they're 98% likely to show up for this type of appointment. So you probably actually don't have to bother them. Right. So you need just to send one a reminder rather than 16 to the other person. So you look at that and go, well, why did ECW implement that? Is because ECW recognized and said, we can start to show that if we can reduce no-shows by 50% using our system, that helps justify our system, right? That's going to make the CFO happy. That's going to make the patients happy. And so I think they're doing a good job to bridge that gap. I think Qualtrics is doing similar things, right? They're using the power of data and the power of behavior analytics to really drive some of these patient experiences that they're able to now offer. So those are just two companies off the top of my head that I think are helping healthcare organizations really, bridge these gaps.
Yeah, I mean, just to carry on the Qualtrics, their integration with Epic and all the work that Epic's doing themselves. I was, I've seen what they've done and the focus more on this kind of CRM idea, which I don't think they've market it as much as they've just done, but I think they have, right? Where they're like, we need a way to be able to drive behavior and to change the experience for the patient. So, yeah, Epic certainly has done some work there as well. I've been fascinated watching, a company I've worked with in Vegas, Care Cognitics, really bringing rewards from Vegas to the clinics and creating that beautiful patient experience, which is it's so fascinating because it's not as hard as it looks once you implement it, right? Where you say, okay, let's focus on what should the patient experience be rather than what tools do we have. I think that's an interesting piece of it, right? Where you say, okay, that matters. The other one for me, I want to give a shout out to all the interrupt vendors because
Mm.
that is such a big part of patient experience when it's done right, where the doctor has access to the information in a way that so that they don't have to go and try to find it again and have the patient provide it again. That's a powerful thing. So whether it's SureScripts providing the prescription data, or whether it's any of the Commonwealth, eHealth Exchange, all the Civitas organizations that are sharing data across it, they're solving some really big problems that I think are really powerful for the patient to not have to do it again. I mean, even throw in another one there, Interlace Health, that does all the front end forms. Like, what a better patient experience than that clipboard. Like, thank goodness we're getting rid of the clipboard, and they're integrating it deeply with the EMR, which I think is the difference. We don't want just a form that goes to a PDF, but Interlace integrates deeply with the EHRs and puts the data in a place where then the doctor doesn't have to ask it again unless it's clinically relevant. They're always going to ask you your allergies. They're going to ask you if it's your right leg, not your left leg, if they're about to, do a surgery, right? I mean, those things are done for a clinical reason, but when it's done just out of redundancy because your systems are poorly integrated, that's a bad patient experience.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in a couple more very quickly, John, along those lines. I mentioned like Pocket Health, right? Like they help patients, make it easier for patients to gather all of their imagery into one spot, access it really quickly. So it's sort of like a interoperability, but at the patient level side. And then I would say like companies like Artria, like that are really trying to consolidate all the patient communications into a single platform, so that the poor patient who has multiple conditions, seeing multiple departments, isn't getting 14 texts the same day, one from each department, saying, remind this, remind that, do this, do that. It would be better if it was all consolidated, and Artria is working on their platform to make that possible. And the last one I got to shout out to, of course, companies like Press Ganey, that are actually doing some real experience work now and really diving into that data, doing sentiment analysis and all these sophisticated things, really to try and point out where there might be opportunities to improve the overall experience. So yeah, quite a fun space. And thank you for diving into this topic with me today, John.
Yeah, I like it too.
And thanks to all of you who tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today. You can find out more details about our show by checking out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com and on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung with my friend and health IT collaborator, John Lynn. Thanks for listening and have a great week.